All right, well, we do have quorum here, so we can get started. All right. Great, welcome. Oh, there she is. Perfect.
Yay, that's excellent.
Reed, thank you for
Uh,
joining.
So good to see you. Oh, you're muted right now,
Yeah,
so you'll
yeah,
have to unmute.
I was lost. I'm sorry.
no problem.
You
We
are
know that
you are
there were a
found.
couple links that might not have been accurate out there.
Yeah, I went to the agenda.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, well, welcome. Start the meeting here. I don't see any guests joining. They might not be able to join because the link might not be accurate. But meeting minutes from April, do we want to approve those? Any suggested changes or any changes needed from the April 30th meeting? Okay,
I have no changes.
we will approve those as is. All right. So tonight we had a couple items that really was a continuation of our last meeting that we didn't get to, but we also wanted to talk a little bit about the future land use map that Andrew had done a little bit of research into or in some recommendations. One thing I will say, just that I didn't have a chance to mention during the last meeting, that outside of even this group, like anyone in the town is also able to provide comments to the CCRPC's future land use map. So it doesn't have to necessarily be an official response from the town per se. Like anyone can log in and add comments. But we're going to talk about future land use map, the tier 1B designation, and a draft recommendation to the planning commission. And then I did update the strategic housing plan. And I think it's in a pretty good place. So I just wanted to talk about the new section in there. And that should round out the meeting for the evening. All right. Andrew, do you want to kick us off here with some thoughts on the future land use map?
Sure. So I wasn't able to, first of all, I just want to I've been a little overwhelmed with a few moving parts in my personal life. So not everything is as perfect. And as I kind of dug through all of this information, it was a really good exercise for me. I definitely learned a lot about how challenging these overlays can be when we start talking about all the different needs and all the different from Richmond to regional to state to federal level of everybody seems to have an opinion and they don't always all merge together very nicely. So it was just a good exercise for me to see the challenges that kind of present itself when we try to map through what the future looks like. And like full disclosure, when I normally look at these things, I look at it in like a 50-year window because housing doesn't move fast, especially with the topography and geographic restrictions we have with everything we've talked about ad nauseum with rivers and railways and mountainsides. So I guess when I look at these questions about tier 1B, for instance, I kind of ponder, well, what's the rule of the absurd? What's the worst case outcome and how reasonable is it for something like that to actually happen? And I mean, I took down some notes here. I could possibly share this, but it's just basically the notes I put together. I think it would take a really, really long time for tier 1B to actually be real in Richmond. Um, I think 50 units is tough. That's a lot of units. So that causes some pause because we're a really small village and a small community, and I'm pro development, and that gives me pause with 50 units. And if that happened 3 times, that's a lot of people very fast. But when you realistically think about where it could be achieved, I don't know where it would even be achieved in 30 or 40 years without long-term vision from private and or public partnerships where they identify, these 6 lots would look really great together and redeveloped into, a new vision for Main Street. And that's where I think if you lay the framework, this being it, from what I read from what Virginia shared with me, it's a permanent status, even though it sunsets like right now in 2027. Is there anything other than the creamery that would even, because I know they want this, would it even change their current scenario? They already are where they are, correct?
What do you mean they are where they are?
Well, they've gone through the whole permitting process and they're kind of on the back end. So like if tier 1B was applied, would they then automatically be granted, okay, well now you work and it's a lot easier for them to get, say, 50 units right there? Or I wasn't understanding any correlation between old permits and old projects that are ongoing versus this new implementation. So I did see their post screaming for 1B to be approved or utilized in Richmond. Looking at like a parcel map, I don't see anywhere else where there's a parcel that you could actually put even 15 units on, unless you merge 3 or 4 parcels together or it made its way to the gateway. So I'm curious if my anticipation is correct that the creamery is the only one that's even broached a subject of anything like this in the town over the last 25 years that would have a land use opportunity that would fall into tier 1B.
Well, so as I understand it, with tier 1B, you can make it apply to whatever overlay you want to apply it to. So, for instance, we would think of applying it to the dense core of the village. If we extended the overlay, for instance, to the far parcel, the far farm parcel, which is 30 acres, that would be an area where they don't want to develop right now, but would they in 8 years? Maybe or maybe not. That would be the only other place that I can think of, unless we, extended the overlay district quite far out.
Mm-hmm.
And it still
Which
has to be
wouldn't
served by water
make
and
sense.
sewer, or it has to have soils that are able to support a community system. The questions about Jolena Court are complicated. First of all, so interim 1B sunsets July 1st of 2027. They do not anticipate building by then, commencing building. So interim 1B is kind of out of the question for them. They feel that they would like to have 1B because they would not need to get an amendment. They think, they have not had a jurisdictional opinion from Act 250, but they believe, and it seems like from our correspondence with the Act 250 Commission and Regional Planning, that they would not have to amend their permit that they already have for the project. So they have a project that's under a master development plan with Act 250 that involves 4 buildings. They only got an Act 250 actual permit for building 1, which is already built. So theoretically, without 1B, they would need to go back to Act 250 and get an amendment to their project permit for building number 2. With 1B, if they're going to have 50 units or less, they would not need to go to get this permit. So that would be beneficial to them. And it would be applicable because they would likely be in the overlay district that we created. However, at the same time, they're also asking for an increase in density, more units. And they might max themselves out if they get the density that they want, which is going to mean a building of over 50 units, then it still wouldn't apply. Tier 1B permanent would not apply to them if they got that many units. So the scenario, there is a scenario to which it would apply to them. If they don't get over 50 units, they don't commence before July 1st, 27. They're in the overlay district, and the jurisdictional opinion from Act 250 is that they wouldn't need to get an amendment, which would be helpful to them. So this is why they want to get the Tier 1B designation.
I personally think it makes sense on many levels in a village district like this long term. The Gateway District would be great as well, although there's not water sewer there. It's not feasible without water sewer along that corridor. When you think about access to transportation and ideally there's connections to bringing kind of that travel corridor together through all the talk of the Gateway and the mobile park and the connecting path that goes out that direction. Then you run into, I did 3 case studies when it comes to like mapping. None of this really applies to tier 1B. I think tier 1B would only, I would not extend that outside of the core village district. It's
Mhm.
too problematic when
That's
you
what it
get
was
out.
kind of designed for, was the core
Yes,
areas,
I
but
would not move it beyond that.
Mhm.
And I'm in full disclosure for those, like even into the infill area on Brown's Court, it wouldn't make sense there either. That's more suitable for infill housing, I would argue. It just doesn't, I'm not going to lean on the character of the neighborhood, but those neighborhoods are cul-de-sac style, so, or dead end. So it's just the logistics around that much traffic in and out of a one way in, one way out road doesn't seem like it's up to what fire departments would like to see. So the downtown area has many ways to connect avenues and back alleys, and it's flat relatively through there. And it would be 50 years, 30, 40, 50 years, because there's such old house. I've talked about this a lot, where there's a lot of old housing stock along there that has, I am sure, plenty of health hazards, be it asbestos or lead or both or other hazards. And sooner or later, those stick-built homes just can't be maintained anymore. So buying them now and tearing them down and redeveloping them doesn't work. The numbers don't work. But if somebody was thoughtful enough to buy both of their neighbors' properties and hold them for 25 years, eventually the opportunity presents itself if the town shows a vision of what it could look like. So I would think that the short term, I guess when I look at it from the short term, there's been nobody that stood up and said, I want one of these permits in Richmond. And there hasn't even really, outside of a project that's been going on for quite some time, there hasn't been even like conversation of who might even be able to do this. So I don't think that there's any short-term or even mid-term impacts where people would panic and be like, oh my God, there's 3 apartment buildings going up in downtown Richmond. What are we going to do? It would take so long to play out. It just opens the conversation for future strategic, timely growth. Does that all seem to make sense?
So are you suggesting that we opt in or not opt
I
in?
would.
You
I
would
would.
suggesting that we opt in. Yep.
Yes.
Which seems like a reasonable position for a housing committee to take somehow.
But I mean, the far farm would be great. I did 3, like from the mapping perspective, I took 3 case studies of 3 different parcels that are not not well utilized currently, that are all in 3 different areas. I guess you could call it a potential prime growth, that are adjacent to either infill housing or gateway. So there's Far Farm, which I'm sure there's a history that I have no um, knowledge of, but I'm sure it's a valuable asset for them to have. I don't know why they would be opposed to any more beneficial zoning. If I were the landowner, I would be, because it only increases my land value. But the proximity is so insane that it's right next to water, sewer, town, walkable. There's a commercial district over there. There's restaurants. There could be a whole different, like that side of the river village vibe. And it seems like it could be really suitable for multifamily housing, not necessarily poorly used single family homes, like strategic pod housing, almost condo style, which Richmond lacks, which the market is thirsty for, offset from the road where you preserve open green space. It seems like just the various opportunities for that parcel, with 3 different roads that it's sharing road frontage with from an ingress egress perspective. Currently it's, ag land or whatever. It seems like something, planned growth or transition infill would make a lot of sense. I don't know the raw bones of exactly the difference, but planned growth seems smart, a smart label for something like that. The other 2 were that Sadler Meadow lot we discussed the other day, and a lot off of Governor Peck that's about 160 acres. That's adjacent to the Green Mountain solar field. That butts up to the current is transition infill, and I think it also is kind of on the other side of the Gateway district on the other side of the interstate. So that's 360 Governor Peck, and that connects to another parcel that is high density residential right above it, interestingly. So it's a big open space. There was a Army engineer permit hold, I believe, for the parcel to put in a bridge someday. I'm not sure if that's coming up, Governor Peck. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, just real quick, do you have the CCRPC map? Just maybe we could pull that up while you're chatting, because
Yeah, I do. I have it right here. Am I able to
you should be able to. It's just
share my
sometimes a little
screen?
hard to picture all of the places.
Where?
Your share button at the
Yeah, there
bottom.
we
Yeah,
go.
it should be right in the
Yeah,
middle
there it
share,
is.
the green one in the
There you
middle.
go. Can you see this cursor here?
Sure can.
Yes.
So this parcel's got multiple spots of road access. It's surrounded by similar housing types. It abuts right here to transition infill all along this corridor. And
That's
the
the
interesting
gateway,
thing
right?
about the, come again?
That was the gateway. That was the transition corridor.
Yeah, right here into this
Yeah, the
Yeah.
lot.
gateway
This
is in orange or yellow or
Good.
whatever.
Okay,
yeah,
good. Keep going.
And
Thanks.
that's the, was it a gravel pit slash
this is
solar
the
farm over there?
GMP solar field right here. There's a
That's
solar field offset Governor Peck up on the hill. You
Governor
can't
Peck.
really see it very well. This is the gravel pits right here.
Yeah.
And then this is GMP. And this is a huge, huge, huge lot that there's development. It sure looks like there were excavators on this lot for 2 months. And I'm of the understanding there's an Army engineer, an Army Corps engineer permit that was pulled to put a bridge in here eventually. And that would service this land, and the same landowner owned at one point in time this lot and the one above it, which is in Jericho. The one above it in Jericho was recently sold as a permitted subdivision. I believe it's 9 units, maybe just under Act 250. Just above that, it was on the market, and a developer swooped in, bought the whole thing, and they've never built anything, never sold anything, and they have no intention to until the market continues to go up. They were just stuffing money there. But this corridor makes sense if and only if the mobile park eventually gets served with public sewer. It doesn't make it makes a lot of sense that public sewer came out there. So having some sort of encouragement from a zoning planning perspective to say, look at this opportunity. It's kind of wasted land. It's by a solar field. It'd be great for affordable housing versus giant 2-3 acre parcels. It would make a lot of sense to do single family, like smaller starter style homes in a place like this. Whereas the other subject property right here, Sadler Meadow, would lend itself better to mid-size housing, which fits really everything that surrounds it. There's wildlife corridor questions. I don't know how this would be deemed a wildlife corridor when it butts up against a mobile park, an interstate that wildlife has to cross over to get anywhere. It's really just pigeonholed right into a heavy residential district. So that was when I started to look just at from what would make sense from a transportation standpoint, fast access to public utilities and transportation, and keep growth centered in those areas versus some people who look at, hypothetically, these two parcels out here. That makes more sense to just keep it as is. Don't mess with it. It's so far from everything. You don't need a bunch of spaghetti lots cut off that has lots more cars coming in and out and disturbs like the scenic view as you come through and look at the mountains coming in from Heinsberg. I would leave a lot of those outlying areas kind of untouched, which is the total opposite of what Williston has done. Williston has forced their development to go farther and farther and farther into the agricultural land. And the next thing they're going to do is they're going to double back and they're going to start coming back in towards Williston, and they're going to snatch up all that agricultural land that they kind of strategically placed in place. There's already landowners that want to do it. So it seems more sense to keep housing as focused as possible and let the quote unquote market know that this is where we're interested in housing. We're not interested in venturing out into the rural area where we'd like to support agriculture and we don't have the facilities and the infrastructure to support housing.
Virginia?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
so-
super helpful.
So Andrew, are you suggesting that we make those areas transition areas?
That's what I think. I don't know if true. What were the two? Sorry.
You're still sharing your screen here.
Put it on my notes. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Like transition, infill, planned growth, something other than what it currently is. And both of those seem like they have a quote unquote label. I didn't cross check all this as well as you probably would have wanted me to, Virginia. Like I don't know if planned growth has to have currently public sewer and water or something that just says this is where we should be looking, not out here, people. It's the interstate corridor is what else are you going to do with that land if there's areas along Governor Peck and right there? That just seems like a really reasonable spot. Far Farm is so close to the town. Sooner or later, it's going to make a lot of sense. And then the Southern Meadow lot, it sounds like from what Connie said, the landowner would be happy for it if they have the right soils, I guess. And it's just surrounded by so much of their valuable housing stock that the landowner wants to do it. The map, when you look at it, it's surrounded by other houses. This one
Yeah, so-
right here, Mark.
That's the peat farm. Yep.
So I think the transition area definition is what is probably needed. I mean, I don't think they quite meet the words that regional planning is using to define their 10 or 11 new land areas aren't necessarily exactly what you would think they are. Like
Right.
our village
Intersect
area,
or
which
something.
is called planned growth, people want to say there's no room for growth, or whatever they want to say. They want to use those words. Planned growth area is, oh, this is a planned growth area. But it seems to be that those areas that you pointed out are more like their definition of a transition area, which is like it's on its way to being a planned growth area.
Would
Somehow.
Far Farm though be something that would make sense, like just skipping ahead to a planned growth area being abutting other planned growth areas?
Well, let's see what planned growth area exactly says here.
Not this right here where it talks about tier one. Oh no, that's what all that is.
Okay, so includes high density existing settlement, future growth area with high concentration of population, housing, and employment as appropriate, a mix of historic and something I can't really read it, non-historic, residential, civic, cultural. Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Look
I
at that
don't
area
know.
as like a new town center, like almost like I said, on the other side of the town, next to an alternate commercial little pocket with a handful of little condo pods. They walk out to a little park. There's a baseball field over there, away from the flood zone. It's right there, right next to everything. It's cool to drive out of town. You're not going to develop anything on the right. That's all flooded all the time where the cornfields are and the sunflower stroll. Everything to the left over there could be just a really, if people like put their imagination caps on in our avatar world and think of what it could possibly look like, it could be really
But it-
impressive. It's just gleaming with opportunity.
Yeah, well, everybody for years has been salivating over that property for that very reason, because of its potential. And we've tried to interest them, the FARs, in some kind of future master planning. and they haven't so far been that interested, although they haven't said that they wouldn't participate in such a thing. Where's the transition? Can you go to the transition area item?
Yeah, right there.
Transition or infill. Areas of existing or planned development. I mean, you know, their categories are sort of so broad that it doesn't seem to,
Well,
they overlap.
The previous category said that there was it was commercially developed already and it had water and sewage already, which the Far Farm does not. So transition seems to be oh, we're shooting for that, but we don't have to actually be there yet.
Yeah, and
So-
I mean, it says the intent of this land use category is to transform these areas into higher density.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, right.
So, I don't
So
know.
identifying them as transition certainly helps create a map that moves in that direction as a message to developers, landowners who look at this map, or town planners.
Yeah, I don't
Is-
think we could designate any of those areas as planned growth areas because it has to currently be serviced by public water or wastewater in the statutory description. That's how I'm reading it.
Can I just
Marie?
ask really quick? Yeah, thank you, Connie. I'm just curious, maybe this is so easy to figure out, but where does the water and sewer stop? Where does it start and stop?
Well, it stops at the Far Farm. The
Okay.
Fars
Yeah.
actually do receive some water and sewer, some water, at least some water. I don't know about sewer, but the stub of the lines is at the Far Farm. They also have another source of water that they use for their agricultural. So in that direction, that's where it stops. It goes up Thompson Road. You know where that is, Mayreed?
I'm gonna pull up a
That's
map,
right
but
here,
is
right?
there a sewer map? Is
Yep.
it like a Richmond sewer line map? Okay, cool.
Yes.
I can take a peek if it's on the
Yeah.
website.
So it's, you know, there are stubs that go like to the schools up the Jericho Road. It stops at the schools.
Okay.
So you could potentially take it up in that direction. There's a stop that goes out of the village towards exit 11, towards the gateway, only it stops like at the village. It stops at the 4-unit house that's in the beginning of the gateway. So that's the way it stops that way. And I think it stops at the fire station going the other way, down Route 2. So, but there is a map that shows these things.
Don't
And
wanna
that's
get
one
us
of the
too far-
questions about expanding water and sewer is which way would you go with it? You know, which way would you go? Would you go out towards the gateway and the mobile home park and all that? Would you go up the Jericho Road, which would probably go past the schools and get up to Sadler Meadow, but you have a whole bunch of other things like Southview to get past. Maybe you could come in through the gateway side, I don't know. And then the Far Farm is right on the edge, right on the end of the stub there.
Yeah,
And then it
so
goes
I
down
wanna-
Cochrane Road. Go ahead, Andrew,
yeah,
sorry.
I don't want to get us too much in the mud on that lot there at Far Farm, but are you saying that there's water and sewer, it doesn't service the parcel, but it's right there in front of the parcel?
They definitely have water from Richmond Municipal Water Supply. I don't know if they have sewage from the municipal.
Well,
But
even
then-
if they don't, even if they don't have supply, if it's at the street, even if it's across the street from the parcel and the parcel is not serviced, there's a big conversation in Shelburne currently. There's a multi-hundred-acre lot that has water sewer across the street, doesn't serve the lot. And it was ruled that that does apply to Act 181. So it changes the zoning of that lot, even though it's 5-acre. 5-acre zoning there. Shelburne can't stop 0.2-acre zoning on those lots. So O'Brien Farms that did South Burlington, when they wrap up O'Brien Farms, they're shifting down to Shelburne. They're going through the permitting phase of putting in a 400 lot development in Shelburne, right off of Thompson's Road over there. So that's kind of established through Shelburne, where because it was at the street, the developer has to pay for the hookup, but Shelburne can't stop the project if it's conforming. They can drag it through the mud. But if there's water sewer across the street, as far as the state's concerned right now, 181 says that that right there is 0.2 acre zoning.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have to be tested because right now, the FARs, if the FARs were
Well, I know, I'm
interested
not saying,
in pushing it,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm not saying
then,
anything's gonna happen. Just
yeah.
to understand like how the state's applying this water and sewer service areas. People in Shelburne are not happy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, here, here in Richmond, we haven't gone much beyond trying to make everybody happy. So, you know, which is not the state's interest in the matter. The state's interest in the matter is having more housing.
So does it,
So,
so does it help? I mean, I hear Andrew saying there is no quick answer, that there is a need for a long-term thinking and planning, that it should include the public as well as private uh, spokespeople or interests in making it so. And that one step in front of us right now is, are there any shaded areas of whatever color on this map that we think should be moving into a more developable direction, such as moving from light green to an orange, is what I kind of gather is happening with this conversation. And maybe that's the next topic, is what are our thoughts about that tier 1B? But that's, but what Andrew has done is said, here are three areas, Sadler Meadow, 360 Governor Peck, and Far Farm, that are possibly better able to um, support more housing if they went from light green to orange. Is that true, Andrew? Do I have that right?
I don't think it's orange. I think what we said is it's the yellow is what the suitable based on the designations available. It's not this orange, it's this yellow.
Yellow. I thought there had to be water sewer before you could turn that to yellow.
No, none of this place has water sewer. This is all
Oh,
private
that's
septic.
true. Right. What is yellow
I
again?
think
Sorry.
it's
the
yeah, I
the
think it's
orange
the
color is the gateway right now, and they put that in the
yeah.
transition. That's transition.
So what are we thinking that area should be? What's the light yellow designation?
That's rural
Infill.
general. I don't think that's the one
Great.
we were looking at, right?
It's the orange color that's transitional.
Well, that's transition, but Andrew was
Okay,
saying
so
that
yeah, no,
rural general.
yeah.
Oh, you thought, okay.
Yeah,
So you would,
it's rural ag forestry, which is like no, don't develop this land.
Mhm, mhm.
This is contributing to XYZ, what all those expensive land use studies, things that have been done over the years that threw massive headaches and curveballs into all of Southview from a land swap perspective and a wildlife corridor and an endangered grass perspective and all of that stuff that applied to Southview, which made that project take 45 years to build.
so are you suggesting that those three areas become orange, transition, rather than rural ag?
Rural general.
Rural general would be definitely Sadler would make sense to be rural general. And I would anticipate that likely would apply as well to the Governor Peck parcel right here. This up here would fit and play nicely with rural general. Parcel down here, I lean to it, but again, it might not apply to the conform to what Mark noted for our farm to be, even though I think it probably is serviced by sewer water, it sounds like. That should be something that's look at that as planned growth. Hey, far family, you might not want to do it, but someday we'd love to plan growth in your on your land. Like
Yeah,
sooner
but
or
you
later,
can't,
an heir in the family is going to be like, yeah, okay, now they're worth $70,000 a lot, and I can sell 200 lots or 100 lots. Well, here's a $70 million windfall. Sooner or later, the numbers work where somebody says, yes, this makes sense to do.
So
And
that sounds
creating a
like
framework.
transition.
It sounds like transitional. Yeah.
So there you go, transition.
okay,
But
so
you don't think those other ones seem like transition. They seem more like rural general, which I forget exactly what it says, but
Virginia, don't ever think we're going to see water sewer anywhere up here in anyone's lifetime. I don't think it's ever going to come up Jericho Road. I
right,
just, based on gone door to door and talked to neighbors, I've talked to Jaw, it just doesn't seem, this corridor here, if I had to pick, Andrew, you're in charge of getting something done, make water sewer expand in the next 25 years, I would spend all my energy on this corridor out towards the interstate. Because we would get our best bang for our buck. This is going to service existing housing stock, which is great. That's me. I'd love public water sewer up here. For the town of Richmond, what makes the most sense, and the water district is here to new potential housing stock and new growth areas where if you come up through a neighborhood that's already occupied, only 15 to 25% of the people are actually going to want to pay hookup fees. So it just doesn't work. This is all new. So that the runway's endless.
Can I
So
just
I would
ask a quick
focus
question?
all of that sewer through here. And this up here does not need to be, growth area. It just shouldn't be sitting here shaded green.
Can I ask a quick question? Andrew, it's mostly for you. If you had to give like a ballpark of sort of what, like the volume of units that could be built, if there were to be water sewer installed in the transition infill area, like, because I sort of drive through and I'm just like, where, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of space.
Right here.
Yeah.
there is not a lot of
So I'm just
development
wondering, like,
land
when we
there.
say bang for our buck, like, what does that really mean? Like, what's just,
What's really interesting, if you drive up and down majority of the United States, outside of the Northeast, we're the last to get everything here in the Northeast. People hate change. It's going to come sooner or later.
right,
Everywhere else in the world, there's services next to the interstate, except for
right.
Vermont and New York and New Hampshire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's a house for sale that sold for about $125,000 more than it's worth along here. And I'm of the understanding that person bought it because they know exactly how valuable that land will be worth someday.
Right.
It's like a 3-acre lot, 4-acre lot, and it sits. When I say long vision, what I
Yeah.
would strive to do is to buy every single one of these. And now I own about 35 acres that is prime for an endless amount of zoning options and housing
Right.
options and hotel options and commercial options. It's
Like, yeah, don't get me
employment.
wrong. I guess the land is there, but when I drive through and I'm like, oh, there's like a storage place already, and there's maybe it's just not having the vision and just seeing what's already built and thinking sort of that's what it is,
It's
as
so
opposed
far
to,
away. And that's why none of this will happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
And some of it may never happen. I'm not saying run it out there now. There's already enough people at the mobile park that there's a demand for it. It would make this opportunity, like the folks there have tried to develop that barn, that storage area they gave up.
Yeah.
There was lots of drama for many years.
Okay.
But that's the corridor that there's enough ample opportunity through here based on density and how you look at how other things operate. And when you couple that with the neighborhood, the mobile park in this neighborhood, future neighborhood right here, this area up here makes it worthwhile because you could put 140 new units in there if in 75 years when our demographics call for it.
Okay. Well, just looking at the time here, do we have any takeaways that we want to bring from this conversation? Like, do we need an official recommendation on some of these changes that we want to do to the planning commission? we want to just log into the plan use map and make some comments on adjusting these areas to either transitional or rural general.
Rural general, by the way, doesn't really seem to apply, I wouldn't say, because it says this may include an area that the municipality is planning to make more rural than it is currently. These are areas that promote the preservation of Vermont's traditional working landscape and natural area features. They allow for low density residential. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's fine.
If the if
It
the
de-
goal is to support more housing in an appropriate way, moving it out of light green towards yellow, towards orange seems to be the thing we want to do. And the map doesn't indicate it will happen. It just says this is a future land use idea map, right? It's do we want so it's one more tool to say to developers and others, here's what you can do with this land. So where the cursor is right now, which is square in the center of Danny Pete's farm, which is one of the areas that, that could turn to rural general. It doesn't change anything that's real. It just says, here's another place where something different could happen. Is that, I don't know if I'm capturing Andrew's idea correctly, but that's what I've written down in my notes is we have areas that could move towards more development in steps. And do we want to communicate that to the CCRPC?
Yes, that's where I'm coming from. Although I think the question here is what's the color change that indicates that? And the rule general, based on what Virginia just described, I feel like it's typically moving something from transition infill into rule general, saying slow down versus speed up. Is that kind of how I interpreted what Virginia just noted on that? Like
Well,
it says, we want to.
Sorry to cut.
So,
Yeah, I was saying maybe there's an action item from this where we send a note to the CCRPC, send it to Maya and say this, the lot off of Brown's Trace, Sadler Meadow, and the Far Farm could potentially be something that we want to develop. What is the best approach to highlighting, signaling that with the colors that we have here?
so what I'm hearing Andrew saying is that just like maybe the Far Farm and the Gateway go to orange as transition, maybe those other two pieces go to beige or whatever color that is, light yellow, from rural forestry to rural general, which I guess looking at their terminology is a slight step towards. It's kind of hard to say. But for me, the question is, should we try to make those transitional areas? If they would have to have maybe community water and sewer, community septic. If we don't think water and sewer is ever going to get up there, they could have, if the soils are suitable, they can have community systems. So the question for me would be, would you want to make those transition or would you want to make them rural general, which may be a step up from rural ag?
Question to me.
Should we ask CCRPC?
Yeah.
We seem to be in doubt.
Clarity from them would be great, just so we make the right recommendation, I would say.
And what's the best way to make that request?
I don't know
Well,
that they're going to be able to help you, but go ahead and ask them. I mean, they don't know the land.
When I look at simply just the vocabulary of transition, and their definition gets muddy for me when I look at their land use here, but
Their definitions are very muddy. I don't,
yeah, so there are so many different like that. This makes sense to me, transition infill, where the goal is to transition this area from where it is right now, which is poorly used, into a more appropriately used land use because it fits the general concept of where we would like to see housing. that's how I think of transition. We're shifting out of it just sitting there and being wasted into being, hey, people, this is a smart place. This is where we're close to utilities, we're close to schools, we're close to fire stations, we're close to schools, public, everything is right there. So that's where it makes sense to be transition. The rural general, yeah, promotes landscape. So it's not promoting housing.
Well,
No.
I think it is if you keep reading. I mean, Andrew, I was persuaded by your argument about the development that already occurred in those other beige areas. And I do think it's sort of like the step up from rural ag and forestry, which is the language is like very protective. Like we are going to take these chunks and we're not, they're going to stay as they are. Whereas rural general, it seems like it's like, let's do a little bit of everything, right? Let's not,
Yeah,
as you were
look,
explaining, you're not going to like throw a huge, affordable housing.
9 townhomes there. No, it would make sense in a corridor like that. And rural general would be 1 acre lots. They're not on the road. They're off one drive, so you don't have all these houses up and down the road. There's a little green space. It's PUDs. PUD, just like the other part of Southern Meadow, just phase 2.
So does that seem like a reasonable approach is to put Far Farm as a transitional area and those other two going from rural forestry ag to rural general?
Yes. How I interpret all of these colors and maps and if I ruled the world and it would be perfect future growth, that would be my vote.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes pretty good sense.
Okay, so what's the action item? What do we do with this decision that I think we are moving towards?
Well, if we want to make that decision, then that has to go, it has to go to the select board, really. This committee is not a part of the planning commission. So I wouldn't recommend particularly that you send this recommendation to the planning commission, but I would send it to the select board along with the tier 1B recommendation. This committee was formed by the select board.
But are we part of the planning commission? I mean, don't we make recommendations to the planning commission?
No, well, you can make recommendations to the planning commission. The planning commission is going to have their own recommendation to the select board. The select board is the one that has to make these decisions to CCRPC. So the select board is going to have to make a decision based on the recommendations that come to it.
Okay.
And one of them will be from the planning commission, who currently is going to recommend not to opt into tier 1B. But that's okay. I think a housing committee has got to recommend to opt into 1B, frankly. I mean, that just seems like the job of a housing committee. The planning commission used to do the housing portion of planning, but this is why we gave it up, because it's kind of on a different track.
So if I was a select board member and the planning commission told me one thing and the housing commission committee told me something else, I'd be like, what? Wait, what are we supposed to do? In other words, it's nice to shed some light on what the future direction of the town might be like. And I support sending the select board a recommendation. I'm not against that. I'm for that. But it would be nice to collaborate with the planning commission in some way so that it doesn't sound like maybe it will be less confusing to the select board.
Isn't the planning commission opining on like everything, like all of the different things, and we're just opining on housing? So like if there is a slight disagreement, that's just like one specific area versus, I mean, isn't there more that's going into this than? No, maybe not.
Well,
I thought the planning commission was also looking at like other expansion of sewer and all that, but maybe not. Maybe this is
planning
just the
commission
CCRPC.
is still looking at these same things. I mean, we're looking at housing, and also we're looking at sustainability of the land, forest blocks, the other things, that Andrew said have gotten in the way of housing all these years. All of those things are what we're supposed to be looking at. We are also looking at in terms of tier 1B, what we perceive as the ability of the town to actually consider the Act 250 criteria for these 50-unit buildings. So, but, you know, what I would like the select board to do is to look at these things and to actually think about it. They don't really have time to think about things much, which is why they get these recommendations. You know, I mean, if you want to try to collaborate with the Planning Commission and have a meeting together with them to explain your point of view, I mean, we should try to explain to the select board the rationale that brought us to the conclusion that we have come to. I think it's very possible for the Housing Committee to come to a different conclusion from the Planning Commission.
Okay, but if I went to the select board, I would at least like to say, we presented this to the planning commission, and this is what the planning commission said, or have you, as chair of the planning commission, there to say so. At least the select board knows that there's been some cross communication. I think that'll make them feel a little bit more secure about trying to say something rather than just have the housing committee say, here's our idea. Good luck with the planning commission. I just don't know that that's as helpful. It's good to give the select board as strong a foundation to make a decision as possible. You're looking like you're
Well-
having a headache, Virginia. I'm so sorry.
Well, I can just tell you that the select board does what it wants to do. And mostly what it does is it reacts to the people who are right in front of it, right in front of the select board saying, we think you should do this. That is what they do. They do not have time really to think about these things, which is why it is good that we explain to the best of our ability why we have come to the conclusion that we have come to. And if we make a persuasive argument, then they're more likely to listen. It's all about the persuasive argument. And if nobody comes to the select board meeting, then they're going to have to deal with these conflicting arguments. But this is why we have different committees, is because they may come to different conclusions.
You want
Not
to
to
just,
speak poorly of the Planning Commission, but I would not hold out hope that these two committees can actually collaborate.
Okay,
So
got
we
it.
can try. I mean, that's okay if you want to do that. But I mean, it seems like we've come to some kind of decision on this committee based on the factors. If we write it up with a rationale, this is what we want to do. I mean, I will be happy to bring it to the Planning Commission and present it as the Housing Committee's recommendation. And they can think about it and they can talk about it, and, you know, if they want to concur with it, that would be great. If they want
Well,
to,
do
at
you-
least some, go ahead, Mark.
yeah, I was just gonna say, Virginia, do you want to just share in just a couple of minutes, like what the viewpoint that has been shared on the planning commission so far as to why you didn't want to, you don't think that they're going to move forward with an endorsement of the tier 1B?
sure. I mean, I'll say this before I start in on Tier 1B, is that they're more likely to agree with the Housing Committee's recommendation about the future land use map. Because the Planning Commission really has not come to grips with thinking about this as much as the Housing Committee has. So I think that there's a possibility that they may concur with the Housing Committee's ideas about the future land use map. So there's that. In terms of Tier 1B, first of all, they think it's moot because nothing is going to happen in 8 years. You know, this is the point sort of that Andrew was making to a certain extent. It also depends on exactly where you define the overlay area, and the Planning Commission has not come to grips with where they want to define the overlay area either. So let's say we're just going to put the overlay area around the village downtown, which is Upper Bridge Street, Railroad Street, Jolena Court District, up and down Bridge Street and Main Street, if that's what we're going to call the Tier 1B district, they don't, it's hard to say, they don't really want to think about it that much because they don't think that there's any space to be putting these 50-unit buildings. The Jolena Court issue has been problematic because there are so many ifs about it. You know, are they going to end up with more than 50 units? And we don't know that because the select board is doing whatever it wants to do about Jolena Court. They're not necessarily going with our recommendations. They've already rejected the first plan that we gave them. They think there should be greater density there, just more density. They haven't told us how much density they want. So it's a little bit unknown whether Jolena Court, the one parcel in that area that actually could benefit from 1B from their point of view. We don't know really whether our planning department and DRB are capable of thinking about the Act 250 criteria, given that there are not that many natural resource constraints in our downtown area. There are a few. So that has featured heavily in the Planning Commission's feeling, apart from the fact that it's somewhat moot, that they don't want, and they politically, they want somebody else to be able to take responsibility for it. You know, they want ACT to be able to say to the people who come to our meetings to complain about various things, they want to be able to say, oh, that's Act 250, you know, they're gonna deal with it. We don't want to deal with it. So that's about all that I can say, I think, about the position. And it has not been finalized yet either, because we have not approved a letter to send to the select board saying, do not opt in to Tier 1B. The planning commissioners have asked for myself and Keith to form a letter that says that so they can talk about it.
Two things that I've heard you mention is the Tier 1B exemption is, right, exempting Act 250 from projects that are up to 50 units. So it's not that it could be a 20 unit or a 10 unit, right? I think it's 10 and above is subject to Act 250. That would be subject to it, right? So it could be
Because
any of
already things that are under 10 units are not subject to
Right.
Act 250.
So between
it's
10 and
between
50,
10
yeah,
and
those are
50.
exempt. And then the other piece, you mentioned like drawing a you know, choosing what areas would be part of this
Overlay.
the overlay. However, I was looking at this document here that was shared with when Maya visited, which has, and my understanding here is any of these, so Tier 1B partial exemption is down here, and I'm just trying to make this a little bit bigger, right? And it would be any of those areas that are designated on the future land use map as a downtown center, village center, planned growth area, and the village area. So is there an option to say, no, don't include the village area in that? According to this, it doesn't seem like there's much of an option. It's just these 4 areas here.
Well, it's those first 3 areas, the purple, the pink, and the whatever that other color is. But those are the areas that are eligible for Tier 1B. So our understanding is that means you can make any of those areas, but not any of the other areas. You can make Tier 1B applicable to them because they're eligible.
And you're saying if we only chose downtown center, then it could be downtown center. It could be
That's
one
our
area.
understanding of it. And, you know, it's unclear, I guess, a little bit what they mean by these are the only ones that are eligible. But the interpretation that we have had is that you can apply it to only any parts of those areas and not any other parts of any other areas.
I think that'd be probably good to confirm.
Yeah, we could totally have that confirmed again. I mean, we've asked, and they seem to be saying that you can make the overlay any way you want as long as it only includes parts of those 3 areas.
Well, knowing where we are in time, I'm seeing 2 action items so far from tonight's meeting. One, the recommendations that we talked about with the future land use map. And it sounds like writing a letter to the select board is probably the best option. Would someone, and so maybe we can have someone draft it now, and the next time we meet, approve it, whatever we want to say, and send that to the select board. Does that sound like a plan? Because I think we're meeting in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think Andrew should write it because he's got the, he's got the rationale, which is persuasive.
Yeah,
And
Andrew.
kind of
and those
knows
of you
what he's
that have
As
the
I
notes,
write it, am I allowed to share it with someone like Virginia and say, is this open meeting law violation? Can I send it with her and
No.
hey, is this the lingo I should be using? Am
You
I
can
allowed to
share
do
it with,
that?
you can do it with one person,
Yeah,
just
you
not
want us to
2.
share it with.
right.
Yes.
So I'll be happy to look at it and work with you on it. And, if it looks really good to me, I think I should take it to the planning commission and say, here's what the housing committee thinks. And they may just say, okay, that's fine.
And this is
It's,
just tier 1B recommendation, is that right?
well, I was thinking about the future land use map.
Future land use
The
map.
Action item
recommendations for the,
2 is recommendation 2 is around tier 1B. And does this committee, which I think we should recommend that we apply for the exemption, or would be the second letter?
I agree with that.
with a rationale, that would be good.
The rationale. Andrew, is that something that you could take both of those letters on?
Yeah, take it.
In your spare time. Yeah. And the planning commission, I mean, we have approached the DRB. What do you think about this? Because the DRB is going to be the one that's going to be doing this work. If we opt in to tier 1B, so they don't need Act 250, these 10 to 50 unit buildings, it's going to be the DRB that makes these decisions. Do we have robust enough zoning to handle it? Do we have a engaged enough DRB to handle it? Do we have a brand new zoning administrator, which we will have after the 14th, to handle it? So anyway, those are the kind of things. And the answers from the DRB have been mixed. Some of them want to think they can do it, and some of them would like to have somebody else to blame. So, I mean, ultimately the select board is going to have to wade through this and make a decision, maybe, unless we can all make the same persuasive argument.
Well, the order in which we do things is interesting to me, but it sounds like, Virginia, the first step from your perspective is draft a letter to the select board and then maybe share it as we go, but draft it for the select board and get a move on.
Yep.
All right. And thank you, Andrew, for taking on the next step. Could it be one letter? Does it have to be 2 separate letters?
They're sort of 2 arguments. I mean, but if you want to put it in one letter, that's probably okay.
It'll be 2 letters and that'll be broken out too, is how I would like to.
Okay, 2 letters. Sold.
Because the planning commission may agree on one and not on the other. The select board may agree on not one and not the other.
Rather than be treated at and looked at separately and not rolled into, it'll be received better by people that might potentially object to one portion or the other. It just will be better for dialogue and conversation to have them have one topic 2 versus 2 mixed into one recommendation.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're good to go. So,
Yay.
All right, I feel like we said in a couple things here, which is great. Any other discussion on tier 1B or future land use? Okay. So the last two items is around the strategic housing plan and the town plan items for the housing committee. So I did work on the strategic housing plan. Virginia and I connected last week, a couple weeks ago, and worked on a few ideas that we could include into the strategic housing plan. We also talked about the town plan as well. I just haven't had an opportunity to formulate those into some more coherent thought other than the notes that I took in connecting with Virginia. So I'd like to talk through the strategic housing plan, and if that looks good from our standpoint, those items can also help inform our action items for the town plan. I also received a letter from the town plan steering committee, and they are looking for kind of an initial readout by June 10th. And I think we have another meeting before June 10th. So my idea is to, or my hope is to flesh out the town plan items as well before our next meeting so that we can also review those and we can get an initial kind of plan or thought over to the steering committee by June 10th.
Next meeting will be a good one.
Yes. All right. So
I'm glad you got that letter from the steering committee, though. The steering committee has been very active, getting the follow-up letters out to people who have already been contacted, getting the letters out to the people who have not yet been contacted. So it's good. It's a good group.
on a roll. Cool. Let me okay. So here is the town plan. This is all the areas we've already reviewed. Okay. So here's the last section around zoning recommendations. So some of the highlights, and I know I shared this earlier today, so you might not all have had a chance to look at it ahead of time. Were in three main categories. So we had some discussion around a couple areas in town, the commercial and village commercial districts, which are along Railroad Street. It includes like the hardware store and the market, as well as the area that has the Stone Corral Brewery and that complex over there. There's those two kind of like commercial areas that don't currently allow for housing in those two blocks. And it sounds like there has already been some discussion as well around wanting to why do we have these two separate different designations anyways, right? So let's maybe clean that up and see if there's an ability to include housing in those two districts as well. I see them as fairly adjacent to already, a lot of housing already, right? So it's not like those are, industrial areas, right, where we don't want housing nearby.
Sounds good to me. Are you looking for feedback on these as you go through them?
Let me just maybe run through real quick and then we can
Okay.
Circle back around and ask you about that.
Great.
There's the developing a townwide density bonus that supports affordable housing, right? So this is a little bit of the carrot instead of the stick of inclusionary zoning, right? So hey, let's give developers an incentive to add affordable housing or senior housing or adaptive use housing, right? That serve some type of public good. So this is already in the works for Jolena Court, right? There was that framework that was built for Jolena Court. Is there continue to apply that more townwide than just specifically Jolena Court? Increasing the maximum allowable height for buildings by 1 story. I don't know if there's a way to indicate, if we were to indicate a foot, that in feet rather, I know it's 35 feet now. I don't know if what that equates to by adding 1 story, but this could be fleshed out a little bit as well. And Act 47 already permits this in towns that or for developments that have 20% or more units designated as affordable, meaning someone was to build here in Richmond and they had a complex that had 20% or more affordable housing units, we couldn't necessarily stop that, right? With our 35-foot rule. So already, it's negated from that standpoint. And then looking at helping to streamline the development review and permitting process, developing clear guidelines for approving new housing units. So this was feedback that came back in our 2002 housing study that, hey, Richmond has a difficult permitting process and review process. It isn't always consistent. It does a lot. It isn't always consistent and would reduce the reliance on like conditional uses, thus, allowing the more administrative permits if it was streamlined or cleaned up. So those are the 4 elements there. Any initial thoughts or reactions, and this could be fleshed out or adjusted as well.
I have a clarifying question. Regarding number 3, was the thought that it would be permanently affordable or just affordable for a period of time, or is that sort of too far into the weeds?
Are you talking about number 2?
Number 3, I think it increased the maximum allowable height. So maybe you were just analogizing to Act 47 and you weren't actually saying that would be part of what we would be doing here, is like tying it to, if they promise to build affordable units. So maybe clarifying on that front first.
Sure. Yes, I'm not saying. I guess the argument in the past has been, maybe we need a new ladder truck or a ladder truck in Richmond if we went up a additional story, right? We don't have the equipment to do that properly. However, yes, I can kind of analogizing, right? This is saying, well, this can already happen in our town, right?
Gotcha, because Act. Okay.
So it's not.
So you weren't saying you would want to tie it.
Correct.
Okay.
And this is a discussion already at both the select board level when they're looking at our Jolena Court proposed zoning amendments, and at the planning commission level, is why can't we go up? We don't have very much space on the ground. We're going to have to go up if we want to have more housing. So, and you don't need a ladder truck, that there are all kinds of regulations now that, you have to be a sprinklered building. And if you think of 19 or 49-story apartment buildings, huge skyscrapers, no ladder trucks can get up that high. So there are fire and safety regulations that you would have to meet, but the ladder truck thing is not, it's just a public perception that you need a ladder truck. And it may be that people have been using that as a reason not to have more height. People don't want high buildings because it's not villagey enough. The planning commission, we deal with this a lot. People just don't want things because they're not villagey. So they think height is not villagey. So, if you think about the buildings at the Round Church Corners complex where Man and Machine and Stone Corral is, there's no land there, but you could go up.
I know. I think about that every time I
Go
drive
up
by.
a couple
Yeah.
of stories, and you could have a very traditional business on the ground floor and residences on the upper couple of stories. So, that's a possibility. There's also another perception that you can't mix residential and commercial, which we're working on overcoming. Anyway, so that's the height thing.
Number 3 also talks about 20% more. Where did that 20% number come from?
Act 47.
Like why was 20% like let's do 20% more if they do this?
Well, in Act 47, that's exactly what it says. If you make an affordable housing development, which consists of either 20% with a minimum of 5 affordable units, you may have, by state statute, 1 extra floor above the limit in your zoning. So it just comes straight out of the state statute. That's what they decided. So, and, just to clarify a little bit about the townwide density bonus proposal, that was to allow you to make something a little bit less than that if you wanted to. In other words, you don't have to make an affordable housing development, which has 20%, but you could have a few affordable units if you wanted to. That doesn't add up to 20%. So I was just trying to give Jolena Court in particular and others the ability to have less than an actual affordable housing development, to just have a few affordable units in a multifamily building.
Generally speaking, it's more than 1 out of 11. If at least in the numbers we've run, if you're required to have 10% or greater affordable units, depending upon the interpretation of affordable with the current market climate and rates, then the project doesn't work and you can't take on financing. So we found it's like 1 out of 11 are affordable, and that's where, generally speaking, for a non-cash buyer who's working with traditional Muskoma Bank, that's roughly where they start to cut off your financing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
So sorry.
I don't know where the state got those numbers that they put in there, but we just put the same
No, it
ones
makes sense.
in there. So
When you already own the land, like what you're talking about, Virginia, at Man and Machine, things work a lot better when you already own the land and you already have infrastructure there. Then it could make a lot of sense. Okay, great. I can go another story, get 4 more market rent units. The roof is still the roof. You still have that cost is going to be the same no matter what. So
right.
having the 2-pronged approach makes sense. It just gives people different tools to utilize.
Mm-hmm.
Any missing broad brushstrokes in these 4 items?
Well, I know this is sort of a big question for 853, but I'm just wondering if we've sort of decided that inclusionary zoning, anything that, like a more robust inclusionary zoning proposal, is not a thing that we want to push. It seems like that's sort of the decision here.
Well, that was the Planning Commission's decision. I mean, the Housing Committee could go for it and, say inclusionary zoning, but, these are all new things for Richmond. The height thing is a new thing. The, Tier 1B is a new thing, and inclusionary zoning is a new thing. And we have been working off Heinsberg experience, partly in terms of the inclusionary zoning. Development is already hard enough in Richmond.
Right.
Do we want to really require inclusionary zoning? We don't,
Well,
we're not really ready to, somehow it seemed to the Planning Commission that we weren't ready to do that as inclusionary zoning. Let's start by just offering it as a bonus.
Right. Isn't it though, like inclusionary zoning can theoretically be what we want it to be, right? Like, I think, right? Like, it's not like we would be using the same exact statutory or ordinance language that Heinsberg uses, but we could kind of
Inclusionary
just,
zoning from a technical standpoint, offering incentives is also inclusionary zoning.
right.
So
I mean,
they're
I think that's
offering,
like a big part of,
Right.
yeah, I think it's a big part
Inclusionary
of,
But isn't
zoning
that what this is?
has to have carrots as well.
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just wondering if this is sort of all, I think all of this is related to inclusionary zoning. But I'm just like, I think there are some tools that may feel more like a stick if you're a developer, but may feel really, really helpful for the provision of affordable housing down the line. Like some of the, like if you do have some kind of a requirement to have some affordable housing and a developer is not able to move forward with that, then maybe there's some sort of a financial cost that goes into the housing trust fund that helps spur like the developments by affordable housing developers, or other important housing programs for moderate or lower income folks. It seems like that's like a helpful source of money
Yeah, and
to help support
I think,
those.
you know,
Yeah.
we had I forget the developer that came and visited that is doing the development in Heinsberg. But that project is what, 250 units, I think, totally.
Avery,
Yeah, it wasn't that the
yeah,
number.
it's 200, there's 186 residential resales, and there's apartment building and something else. Those will be on the market in 4 months. I'm actually listing every single one of those land lots. They're not building them, they're listing them just as land.
Okay, so I think they had to go through inclusionary zoning or they had some inclusionary zoning requirements for that project, and in his mind, he was I wouldn't say he was jumping up and down happy, but like he felt that the process wasn't too onerous for him to go through and meet the requirements of inclusionary zoning for his project, right? Like he had a good experience working with their affordable housing committee and the town throughout that whole like project, and felt like they could meet those requirements. But that was also like a large project, right? Like I think where we've also talked in Richmond is that we don't have the space per se to have a 250 unit development go in, or maybe we have one or two pieces of land, right? And are we creating more barriers for any kind of development by adding inclusionary zoning requirements? So that was, I think I could still be persuaded either way, but that was, I think, the argument is, are we adding too many barriers, and can we start with the carrot versus the stick, saying, hey, if you want to build this, you have to have this many units be X.
Works at scale, and that, like you noted, that's why
Right,
they were
works at
able to
scale.
do it, because like looking at, I'm building a triplex, our cost per unit is going to be $3,100 when it's all said and done, between taxes, insurance, and principal and interest. That doesn't factor any utilities like landscaping, snow, property management. So if you're talking about building a 3-bed, 2-bath condo, townhome for $3,100 per month is what I'll spend out of pocket. I can't make one affordable because now those are going to be 3,600 per month. So it breaks down. So I just don't build any housing. So there's a breaking point. That's where that 1 out of 11 number comes from. I can do 11 units at my type of scale and provide one affordable. But after that, the bank won't loan the money and the developer won't make any money. So they're not going to do it. So I think it's about probably 40 plus units. You could start to reasonably get people who could be like, okay, I could do 6 affordable, like maybe, where the numbers start to actually work. So looking at what we have at our disposal, we're going to have a lot of one-off, 3 units here, 5 units here, 3 units here, and there's nobody that's going to be able to Champlain Housing Trust, if we partner with them, like we've talked about over the years, those are the ones that would need to take on those projects. And finding opportunity for them maybe is something that we could, not through this document, but as a committee, look for.
Well, I think it should be in this document, not in this
Not
section,
Champlain,
but
no, I said
yeah.
Champlain Housing Trust. Yeah, that
Oh.
they don't go in here. Yeah, that's what I was
So,
talking about.
yeah, I mean, I was just asking a question, but it sounds like at least two, but maybe more, think that this is sort of the scope of exclusionary zoning type provisions that we would want to put forward.
I mean, I'll say I'm open to being persuaded, right? Like, you know, maybe there's more with inclusionary zoning that we're not considering here.
Yeah, I just think if we're serious about trying to get like a housing trust fund that does something like then we will need to think seriously about like revenue sources. And I think that other towns sort of lean heavily, but I completely agree that, you know, you can't make it so prohibitive that no one's going to build. But I don't think there's any like hard and fast rule that it has to be, you know, the provision has to sort of be written a certain way. But I do think,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think in the town plan, the 2018 town plan, to your point about partnering with the nonprofits, that is in there. And hopefully, you know, that'll be in the next iteration of the town plan. And if we, I mean, it's questionable whether we're even going to be able to get the density bonus program by the select board, but at least it seems like a step in the right direction, and then, you know, go to inclusionary zoning after that if we think we have the space to put projects that are big enough or conditions change or whatever. Anyway.
All right. Any other comments on this section here? Does somebody else want to read it and add anything to it? My next step would be to share it with some folks in town just for feedback, right? That are in this space as well, to see like if we hit the mark or we didn't hit the mark, right? On this document in general.
Who do you want to share that with, Mark? Sorry, I missed it.
I spoke with Miranda a few months ago, so I was thinking Miranda would be a good person.
Oh, yeah.
I had a neighbor that worked for, I forget that wasn't Champlain Housing Trust, but it was Evernorth, I think, and was going to share it with her as well. And then Virginia, you mentioned one other person. Who am I forgetting?
I suggested Molly Dugan. She works with Cathedral Square. You could try her. She and Miranda Lascazzi talk about these things sometimes with each other. So,
yeah. So just getting some feedback, right, from folks that we're connected with, and again, see what kind of comments, because they can match up. You know, they know a bit about Richmond, right, and connect between what we're trying to do in the current comment frame.
That's great, Mark. Go ahead, Mary.
No, I was just going to say, I just asked you questions, but I think it looks great. I think all of those are really important ideas.
Yeah, Mark, good job.
All right, well, I know we're at 9, a little past 9. I plan on making some adjustments to our town plan recommendations and then have that on the agenda for next time we connect. Anything else for the agenda next couple weeks?
We have plenty on the agenda. You don't need to ask for anything more.
and Andrew's letters are going to be on the agenda.
Yes.
Yes,
correct.
I have draft letter to select board regarding future land use map, Andrew and Virginia. Draft letter to select board regarding recommendation to apply for tier 1B designation, Andrew and Virginia. Strategic housing plan update, Mark, and town plan items for housing committee. Is that cover it?
Yes.
It will keep us busy. Our next meeting is on May 28th at 5:30 p.m. Can everybody make that?
May 28th. Yes.
That sounds like a yes from everybody. Marie, does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay. Sold. We'll meet on the 28th.
Oh, wait, the 28th at 5:30? Okay.
That's,
5:30 to
yes,
7. So
that's the
at
goal.
7, I'll have a town plan steering committee meeting, but I can meet
Oh,
at
man.
5:30 to
You
7.
are made out of steel, truly, Virginia.
Yeah, the
But
back-to-back meetings are a little,
it's hard.
sometimes
So,
I forget which group I'm talking to. But anyway,
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Anything else, Mark?
I am set.
oh, Connie, let's just add to the agenda. Maybe this is just logistics, but discussion about different meeting time. We can talk
Okay.
about that next time. Thanks.
Fine.
Yep. Yep. Got your name on it, Mary.
so if
All
it's
right.
going to be at 7, for me, it can't be a Wednesday, but
All right. Right.
Anyway,
All right.
could
All
be
to be
some other
figured
night,
out.
maybe.
All right. Thanks.
Bye. Thank
Okay,
you.
All
thank you all.
Great.
right.
Night.
Thanks,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Night.
Bye-bye.